Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for the latest Pangolin Beyond webinar, Understanding the Beyond Universe Tips and Tricks. I'm very excited to announce that we have Garbos from LaserTech Canada with us here today. Derek has over 25 years of experience in the laser light show industry, and he's one of the most advanced users of the Beyond software. In today's presentation, we're going to be focusing exclusively on the Beyond universe, providing you with tools, instructions, and information on how to use the universe for live laser show control. Prior to this webinar, we also emailed out a PDF overview of the topics that will be discussed. Hope you had a chance to download that so that you can follow along with us at home. If you didn't, don't worry, just send me an email. My email address is justin@pangolin.com, and I'll get those files over to you right away. In regards to questions, we're going to ask that you guys all post your questions onto the Pangolin forum so that those who maybe didn't get a chance to attend the webinar or watch the video can benefit from the questions and responses. In regards to the Beyond Workspace files, we'll be emailing those out to you as well following the event. And we'll also be posting those on the Pangolin Show's portal so that you can obtain them at a later time. So, without further delay, I'm very pleased and honored to welcome Mr. Derek Garbos. Derek?
Thanks, Justin. I'm really happy to be here today. Special thanks to Bill, Alexi, Justin, and the entire Pangolin team. Over the past 5 years, I've worked on the development of QuickShow and now Beyond. More than 80% of the shows that we do are live performances, and I'm sure it's the same for many of you. We are working hard on making live show control easier and more powerful. Today, I will be giving you the basics of the Beyond universe, as well as some advanced options and methods. Some of you may already know some of what I will be demonstrating, but I'm sure at some point there will be something new and helpful for everyone. So I think we should get started. What is the universe? The universe is a window where we can visually set up our exact room layout with lasers and zones placed as they are at the show. It also allows us to quickly select zones and to see what is playing and where. You can even add custom controls to the universe. It definitely makes multi-projector live show control and programming much faster and easier. Using a second monitor. To reduce the amount of windows and information on your main Beyond screen, I recommend using a second monitor for the universe, the preview window, and for a second workspace. We will have a look at this dual monitor configuration a bit later. Before we open the universe, there are a few things that we need to do. Setting up projectors and zones for the universe. What we normally do is we take our FB3s and we label them on the top with a few bits of information that will be helpful throughout the whole programming or show process or setup process. We like to take the serial number of the FB3 and stick it right on the top of the unit, which is really easy for reference. Next, we like to put a piece of masking tape or some other sticker on the unit that you can just write on which projector that FB3 belongs to. What we normally do is we have a dedicated FB3 for each projector. This is a permanent dedication. We think it's a good idea to have one FB3 for every laser projector. So not only does it allow independent control, but it also gives us the benefit that it will retain the setup settings for that projector and FB3 combination. So items such as color in the setup and scan rate and so on, those will be recognized every time you plug that FB3 back into the Beyond software. The next thing that we do at the show site is set up our projector settings. Let's go here to Settings, Projector Settings. We select the projectors that we want to set up. Just for the universe demo, I'm going to set up 2 different projectors. Doesn't really matter which ones here, we'll just do it for test. We reduce the size of the X and Y and move it up top just for safety reasons. And then we can put on a test pattern and set up our color settings. So we're happy with that. and then adjust our scan rate and color and blanking shifts. That's usually about all we need to set up each time. And then we go back to size and position, and we're going to make it 100% on the X and Y again. That'll give us maximum flexibility later on. The other important thing is to make sure that each projector is set up straight out, so no mirroring or inverts. So we want to have them set up all straight out, and I'll show you why a bit later once we're in the universe. Now that we have our projector set up, the next thing that would be good to do is go down to the bottom of the screen here, and the two projectors that we're going to use, we're going to actually label them. So if you right click on that projector, we can rename it. So let's just call this left 1. And we'll call this one next to it right 1. Now we're going to open up the projection zones. So here we have our projection zones, and what we're going to do is we're going to assign the projectors to the zones. So let's make a zone called left 1. We'll take the first zone here, we'll create one called left 1, and we'll move it up the list. And then we'll take this one here, we'll create a new one, we'll call it right 1, and move it up the list. So now we have left 1 and right 1. Now we have to assign our projectors to it. So let's go on this one here, and we'll select the projector that we called left 1. And for right 1, assign the projector right 1. Now all the other zones that remain there that we will not be using at a particular event, what we want to do is we actually want to either mute them, usually mute them, or you could even delete them if you're not using them. So we're going to go ahead and mute the zones that we're not using. So we'll select them and just press the mute button. This way there's no chance of any accidental output going to zones that have not been set up. So it's very important. Next we're going to go over to the BAM, the beam attenuation map. And I just wanted to explain one thing quickly. We recently did a show and there was a video projector set up just over front of house. And as we know, lasers and video projectors do not mix too well. So it's very important to mask out an area. And some people, rather than masking out an area, they might choose to scan under or over the video projector, but you're kind of sacrificing the show by restricting your zones like that. So what we normally do is we paint or we black out an area right around where the video projector is. And usually the video projector will be centered in the room. So if you paint an area or black out an area right around that projector, you still have the entire area all around it for the laser effects. And actually, you don't even really notice or see that area is painted out because it remains symmetrical. As I mentioned, the video projector is usually centered. Now we're going to set up our preview window. So we'll go over to the preview tab. And in the case of graphics, well, you would set it up view as laser graphics. In the case of audience scanning beams, what we'll do is we'll select that and we'll go over to the ERP. And we're actually physically going to set up the position of this projector. So this one's called right 1, so let's move it over to the right. So let's say 35 down here, 35 here. So now we've moved that projector over to the right. Next we'll go over to the one on the left, and we'll do the opposite and move it the same amount to the left. So we could go minus 35 and minus 35. There. So if we want to preview how both of them look, we can just select the outputs here and switch back and forth, and we can see that we have one on the left and one on the right. And now it's finally time to open the universe window. So what we're going to do is go over here and we're going to open up the universe window. We're going to open up the universe, we'll maximize it here. So now we have a blank universe. First thing I usually do is if you click on Edit and then View, it gives you a grid. Now the grid's really going to help us for the positioning of items. And what I normally like to do is go to right-click, go to Layout Properties, and use the maximum resolution of the grid. So in this case, it's 50 and 50. Okay. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to insert a background from the actual show site. What's nice to do is take a picture of the stage or the area where the lasers are set up, and then we can take that and put it as the background in the universe. So I'm going to open an image as an example here. We go over to Components, Image, we drag the image over, and we click on the inspector. The inspector is all our settings for each of the components. And we'll go down here to Open. We're going to open up a picture. I'll take a picture from one of our show sites. And there it is as the background, so we can center this a little bit. Good. And now the next thing we're going to do is you can insert your own logo. We like to put our logo at the bottom of the screen so our clients and any onlookers can see our logo. So we'll just add another image, bring it over here. We'll open logo. And we have our logo. We'll just put it down at the bottom. Down there. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to start with our laser projectors. So if you remember from before, we created one called right one and left one. So we're going to select the components, laser projector. We're going to drag it over and place it where it actually is at the event. So let's say if we had a laser projector here, here's there, okay, I'll drag it over here. And then we're going to drag another one over on this side. Now, we like to put these little icons as laser projectors in here. So I'm going to include these icons with the files that you're going to get. We're going to add, I'm going to go to the inspector, and in this laser projector here, we can open a little picture for it. So I'm going to give you these icons, which we like to use. So we'll open up this little guy here, and we can center it, place it. Usually bottom center is good. I can reduce the size of this a little bit, make it a little bit neater. So this is one of our laser projectors. And then we'll do the same with this one. We'll open up the picture for it. And we'll center it right at the bottom. And then reduce the size a little bit. And place it here. Okay. Now we're going to want to set up or assign the indexes to these laser projectors that we've set up. So if we go to the inspector, we see here that it's asking for projector by index. Now how do we figure that out? Well, it's quite easy. We can go, we'll just minimize the universe. If we go to settings, laser and emulator controller hardware, we open that up and if we look down our list, we can see, oh, here it is. This is left one and right one, the ones that we've created. Now left one happens to be index 13 and right one happens to be 14. So we'll just remember that, left one 13. Go back to the universe. This is our left projector, so we'll set the index as 13. And then the right projector, we'll set it as 14. So now we know our left one and our right one are set up accordingly. Now we're going to position the zones to match these laser projectors. So we're going to go back to Components, and we're going to select Zone. Okay. So we can start with left one. We'll grab the projection zone that we created called left one. We'll drag it over. We could place it up here. And then we'll do the same. Grab another one, right one, projection zone, bring it over here. Adjust that. Approximately like that. Alright, so now, if we press the play button, we can select our zones. Okay, so now that we have our two zones set up, what we can do is we can click on either of them to select them, or we can click on both by holding down Shift and selecting both zones. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just minimize this a little bit here and give you an example. So if we select this zone, we can send a cue to that zone. If we select this one over here, we can send a cue to that zone. Or if we hold down Shift and select both, we can send a cue to both zones. As well, you might want to readjust your enhanced reality preview window after you've positioned your projectors here. So let's just select that one there, and then we would see our output as well on the preview window. The next thing we're going to do is have a look at creating a multi-zone select button. So I'm just going to go to Edit, and we're going to go find the multi-select. Here we go. So let's take this and drag it over here. And now I'm going to configure it by adding the zones that we want to select with this button. So if I go to multi-select and click the edit button, for example, I could add this zone right one and this zone left one. Okay. You can also adjust the labels on the buttons. You can show the labels, remove the labels, change the colors, the positioning. There's all kinds of little features. You can change the shape of the buttons. You can make them round or ellipse. So let's test out what we've done here. If I press play and I press this button, it selects both zones. If we deselect, or we have just one zone selected and we want both selected, again we'll press this button and it selects both. So it's a multi-select button. Now we're going to create a button with a script on it. This is where it starts to get interesting. So we're going to go to Edit, pick a button right here, we'll drag it over. Now on this button, what we're going to do is we're going to create a button that's going to change pages. Alright, so now that we have our button, we're going to put a Pango script on it. We're going to script that button. So if we go to the inspector, scroll down, we go to Pango script, edit. We're going to look at the commands by category here. If we go to live control, actually, it would be pages. So it would be under pages. Go to pages, and we're going to select next page, which we see as a command here. So we can take this command and we're going to insert it here in the script on the change So it says put your code below. So we'll just highlight or put the cursor here, and then we'll double click on select next page. Now let's put that command here. So what's going to happen now is every time there's a change, meaning a press on the button, it's going to select the next page. So we'll click on OK. Let's give that button a name. Just for fun, we'll call it next page. Now let's try it out. So we'll press play. And we'll press next page. So we see here now that it's every time we press it, it's changing our pages. Okay, so we've created a button. Now let's try creating a slider effect. So we'll go to Edit. And we'll take a slider. Take the slider here. Bring it over on the page. Let's make it a vertical slider. Adjust the shape of it. So on. Now what can we do with this slider? Why don't we create a master color slider? So how would we do that? Well, we're going to link it to a value that already exists. Now, in Live Controls, we already have a master color slider. So let's try and find out where that is. So we'll go over here, we'll click on Search, and we'll go to Master. We'll double click on that. Now we're looking for color slider. Go down and find this guy. Ah, here it is. Okay, color slider. So if I double click on that, gives us the command master color slider. I'll press OK. So now this slider is linked to the master color slider. We have to give it a minimum and a maximum value and a default value. So the default value is 0, which would be no color change. The minimum value would also be 0. The maximum value of the color slider is 255. So we'll put that in there. Now we'll go back to press play. Just reduce this so we can see if this is working. So if we go to Live Controls, just bring our color slider here. Now, if I raise this, it should control the color slider. So there we go. So now we've created a master color slider on the universe. Okay, now we can try creating a wheel. Go to Components, Wheel. We'll drag a wheel over to the universe. This one, let's try controlling our master zoom. So we'll go to Components. So we have our wheel. Go to the inspector. We're going to link this to master zoom. So let's search. We can go right to master. And find our zoom. Here it is. Zoom. We'll double click on that. The command is quite simple. It's master.zoom. So now we've linked this wheel to the master zoom. Let's try it out. So here's our zoom slider. We press play. And see. Oh, it moved a little bit, but it didn't move a lot. The reason is, we go back in here, we look at the inspector. I haven't set its min and max values. So let's do that. So the default of the zoom would be 100. min value 0, max value 100. Let's try that, see what that does. Let's play. Okay, here's our zoom slider. And now we're able to control our master zoom slider with a wheel. Now, create something else. We're going to create a master effect. So let's go over here to master effect. We'll drag this over to the universe. Okay, let's create one. Let's create a strobe effect. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the inspector. We're going to click on toggle mode. We're going to make this a toggle. Now we're going to go press play. We're going to click on our button here. And now we see a tab here that has popped up called Master Effect. And for this one, we're going to create an effect for this button. So let's add oscillating effect brightness. So 0 for fully off, 100 for fully on. We're going to do this in 2 discrete steps, so it's really on, off, as we see over here. And then, of course, we would want to increase the speed. So there we've created our strobe effect on the button. So let's see if it works. Right now it's strobing. If I press the button again, stop strobing. Press it again, we have our strobe effect. So these are some of the many things you can create and do with the Beyond universe. Next, I'd like to show you something that we've put together that we use for all of our events and for programming, the LaserTech Zone Standard. Now I'd like to introduce you to the LaserTech Zone Standard. This allows you to standardize your cues to work with smaller and larger shows, with fewer and greater number of projectors. The standard has 57 zones. 16, the first 16 are the most common, which are available in the 4x4 preview window that we see here. So these are the zones that you would use probably most commonly, and in the case where you're using one monitor, you can easily see them here. So let's have a look at the zone standard in the universe. In some situations, we have only overhead zones or upper zones. So we'd be doing our laser show with multiple projectors and just having stuff aiming overhead. So that is what we see here with the top row of zones from left 1, left 2, left 3, and so on, all the way across to right 1. In other situations, we'll have an upper zone, and then we'll have a mezzanine, in between levels. If there's 2 levels in a theater, then we might want to have a second zone for each projector that goes across the mezzanine. That second lower set of zones might also be a downstage zone. So you might want to have a zone for each projector that terminates on the front edge of the stage. And then the third row going across that we see labeled left 1 crowd, left 2 crowd, left 3 crowd. Those are audience scanning zones for each projector. So in the case where you're doing show where you have audience scanning, you would be using those zones. And up top we see we have 4 graphic zones, graphics 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those zones can be assigned from any of the laser projectors and moved around depending on your show site. We also have 5 other graphic zones, which we can see over here in the list. We have graphics 5 through 9 as well, in case you're doing a graphic show with more than 4 laser projectors. Now, the way the laser projectors are assigned to these zones, if you look at the laser projector on the far left, and then you look above it, that projector will project to left 1 crowd, left 1 lower, and left 1. And then the one next to it projects to all the left 2s, and then you have the left 3s, and so on. When we create cues, if we assign them to 9 projectors, it will remain compatible with a different setup using less projectors. So this is what I want to demonstrate. And I encourage that when you create your cues, set them up or create them with as many projectors as possible. In the situation where you're using more lasers for a show, your cues will work. In the situation that you're using less lasers for a show, your cues will also work. Now, why is that? Let me start a demo cue here. Okay, now this cue we see goes across 9 projectors. It's a multi-cue, multi-projector cue. It could also be a capture that would do this. So in the case where we have 9 projectors, this is what we would see. If you were to take this same cue and go to a show where you would have 8 projectors, well, you probably wouldn't have a center projector, so you'd have 4 projectors on each side. So if I click on the 8 projectors universe tab up here, it illuminates the center row, and we see that our cue still plays across the 8 projectors. In the case of 7, well, we would have a center again, and we'd have 3 on each side. In the case of 6, the center disappears. We would just have 3 and 3. 5, we have 1 in the middle, 2 on each side. 4 would be just 2 on left side, 2 on right side. 3, we'd have a left, right, and center. 2, we just have a left and a right, and 1 projector, just 1. So this gives us flexibility to reuse all of our cues with pretty much any number of projectors. Now what if we only have upper zones at a show, and we've created cues that use upper and lower zones? Well, there's a solution to that. There's a new feature in Beyond that was recently added a few days ago called Zone Routing Replace Zone. Now what this allows us to do is, here I've created these force buttons. The force buttons will do one of 2 things. They will take whatever is playing, and you can force it. For example, in this case, if I want to force everything only to the upper zones, I would press force upper, and it would shift everything up top here. So it's a nice effect. You'd be able just to switch back and forth. If I wanted to force them all down lower, I could force lower. And if they were all playing up top, I could force them to a stagger configuration as we see here. Now I'd like to show you how this zone routing replace zone works. So I'm going to go to the edit button. I'm going to select force upper. We'll go to the inspector. We'll go to the master effect. It's an effect. So if we see in our list of effects now, if we go to add an effect, well, here's all the ones that most of you recognize. And here we have 2 new ones. And This one that we're using right now is the zone routing effect. Replace zone. Now, in order to do this, you have to create, for each zone separately, you have to give it a replacement. So if we look at this left one, in this case here, so what we're telling it to do here in this part is left one, zone left one lower will go to left one instead. So it's going to switch from anything that's playing in this zone will now be switched to this zone. You have to do it create these changes independently for each zone as an effect. Now I'd like to show you two buttons that I've created up top for fog and haze control. These buttons are linked to DMX output. So if we look down here at our DMX monitor, if I was to click on the haze button, you see the output down here, and notice the lines are thicker. So we've increased the width of these bars so they're much more visual. So we have one button for haze and one button for fog. These are toggles. So we can control our fog like this. And what I'll do is I'll show you how these buttons were created. So if I go to edit, let's go to haze, go to the inspector. These are buttons that are actually scripted. So I've set them to toggle mode. And if I go down to the bottom here, we can have a look at the Pango script that I've assigned to that button. So we'll click on edit. So on this button, I've labeled it as haze button DMX channel 2. And we want to toggle it on and off. So there's a little trick, and you might want to use this, well, everybody's going to have a copy of this universe set up afterwards. So you can use this as an example or a copy paste to create similar things. So what I've done here is, if you see on change, so basically when there's change, something's going to happen. So the first line here, it detects alternate changes. So every time you press a button, every second time you press a button, the value will be greater than 0.5. That's how the detection process happens. So if the value is greater than 0.5, that means the button's been pressed for the first time. It goes to the start process. Start process is just a label that I've put to create a routine down here. So it goes to start process. It initiates DMX channel 2 output level 255. So it's going to turn on our hazer. And then it exits. Next time, the second time that button is pressed, the value is no longer greater than 0.5. So it does not go to the start process down here. It goes to here and it turns off the DMX channel 2. It turns it to value 0. So that creates our toggle on and off with two different events that can happen. You can also create a loop down here in this start process. So if you want to create something with a loop that happens until the button is pressed a second time, you can do that down here. If you are going to create a loop, it's very important though in your loop to add a function called sleep, which is just a delay timer. Sleep 200 would be recommended. What that does is it allows the loop not to run too quickly, and it's a little bit easier on the system resources. Okay, now we're going to have a look at a few more controls that I've put on, which are quite handy. I've created a brightness group right here. So essentially you have a brightness slider We have a fade down button, fade up button. We have a 0% brightness, back up to 100% brightness. The 0% and 100% buttons come in quite handy because you could actually have something playing, press the 0% button, then you could disable your laser output, pair something new, then re-enable laser output, and it puts you kind of in a standby mode. And when you're ready, you could hit 100%, and then that change will come online. Next, we have the speed group. The speed group down here allows you independent control of both BPM speeds and clock speeds. So you have two sliders here that can be controlled. That one there, that one there. Now the reason nothing's changing is because the cues that you see playing right now are actually set to BPM and not the clock. So it's only the BPM slider that will affect these particular cues. Up here we have a hard pause, instant stop. And down here we have a soft pause, gentle stop. And you can interact between the two of them. You could hard pause and then you could start up again soft. Or you could stop, pause, start up again, hard cut. Now these speed buttons that I've created over here, these are quite neat because they actually control both of our different types of speeds at the same time. So if we want to double the speed, this will double the speed of both of these sliders at the same time. So if I click on this, you see them both increase at the same rate. And if I click on this, they both decrease at the same rate. Now with the speed group, with the two different speed sliders that you have here, if you want this to work properly, to have independent speeds for each, there's one item that I need you to be aware of that's in the configuration. We'll just go to the configuration, we'll go to live control, and this one right here at the top, apply master animation speed slider to beat tempo. For this one, you'll want to just leave it unchecked. So that basically means that our master speed slider, which is over here, down here, this controls the clock speed. And the clock speed only, so it doesn't combine clock speed and BPM. So this will be just clock speed and this will be just BPM. Now I'd like to show you an effect called lower 50. This one's kind of good in situations where you have, let's say you have an effect going and it's just a little bit too high and not quite bright enough, and you really want to bring it down closer to the audience. So let me select the upper ones. I'll put on a demonstration cue. Actually, we can just use this one here. So if we have these playing, we want to bring them down a little bit closer to the audience. Well, lower 50 just squashes them down lower, just reduces the height and brings them right down closer to the audience. The button underneath it that we see here is Scan Boost. If you have a little bit too much going on the same projector, and it's you're experiencing a little bit of flicker, by pressing Scan Boost, that will increase the scan rate. So it should reduce your flicker. So let's just have a look and see how I programmed that. I go to the inspector, the Pango script on that button. So I've set it to scan rate 150. 150%. So what does that mean? Basically, it means if you're scanning at 24K, well, you'd multiply that by 150%, and that would be that would give you your increase in scan rate. So once again, what I've done here is created two different things that happen every time you press the button. When you press the button for the first time, it goes to the start process, which is down here, and it changes all the scan rates to 150%. The second time we press the button, it will go here and turn the scan rate back down to 100%. Let's talk a little bit about mirrors. I mentioned earlier when setting up your projectors that all of the projectors should be set up to project straight out all in the same direction without any mirrors applied. And this is the reason why. It allows us to have more consistent mirror control within our setup. So if you look here, I have set up some mirrors. Let's put a Q on. So now they're all straight out. This is the way that they were set up with the projector settings. Now these buttons here allow us to create mirrors. So we have a button that does mirror left right. So we see it just does a left right split. We have a button that does left right left right. So it alternates mirrors. We have one that's called left right left center right. What this one does is it swaps the X and Y for the center projector, and it just simply mirrors the 4 on the left and the 4 on the right. So it's quite an interesting effect. And then we have one that does a combination of XY swaps and mirrors. So we see what this does here across here. Now let's have a look at this with the ERP window at the same time. Just resize this. Open up the ERP window. Now we can really see what's going on. So, this is with no mirrors. This is with a left-right mirror. That's a left-right, left-right. That's with the center, doing an XY swap. And then a combination of XY swaps and mirrors left and right. I've also created some buttons called shifts. So I've just changed a Q, so we have a new Q going here. Shifts are time shifts between zones. So what we can do is if we select shift 1, create sort of a 1-beat time shift between the zones, so we get kind of like a wave effect going across. Shift 2.7. 2.7 is a really interesting number. For whatever reason, it seems to create the best random type of shifts. So we see the random action going on here. So that's called an asymmetrical shift. Another symmetrical shift would be a shift 4 beats. So now we have a symmetrical shift going on between the zones. And shift 8 will create a different type of symmetry. Now what's really cool is we can do a combination of shifts and mirrors to create all kinds of different staggered patterns and shifts across the zone. So let's try a couple here. So there are many interesting combinations that can be created on the fly with these buttons. You can also capture these creations and create a whole bunch of new, different, and interesting cues across all your projectors. Blackouts. The blackout button and controlling what the blackout does. Sometimes it would be nice to be able to press blackout and it would reset everything, including all the live control adjustments that we've played with. Other times it would be nice to press blackout and not have it do that, so that if you start another cue, you would retain your live control settings. So I'll give you an example. What I've done is I've created two buttons. One is a blackout and one is just a stop everything. So let's have a look at the difference between the two. If we were to go to live control, and let's say we were playing a cue and we did some sort of a live control adjustment to it. Let's say we turned it red. So now we're working with red. If we press blackout, that red resets. Now the stop all button, the difference is if we change everything to red and we press stop all, everything will stop, but our live controls do not reset. They stay the same. So next time you restart your cue or the next cue, well, it will come back on in red. One thing that we have to keep in mind is in the configuration settings, there's a button or a tab called blackout, and here we can select what happens when we press blackout. So in order for those two buttons to work that I just demonstrated, I would recommend leaving all of these or selecting all of these so everything resets when you press blackout. So again, you do have the option to do a full blackout, or you have the option to do a stop all, which retains any changes in the live control settings.